Welcome to another study with Deborah, and today we shall be looking at the cup of the Amorites. The cup of the Amorites. Now, you would wonder, who are these Amorite people? Now, we know the story of how the Lord promised Abram that he'll give him, a land flowing with milk and honey and so on. And he took him from his people, from the Ur of the Chaldeans, and brought him over to the land of Canaan. But first, from the Ur, they settled in Padan Aram, so present in Aram. So hence you hear the term, our father was a wandering Aramean. Aram is in present day Syria. Okay, so he came and he settled in the land of Canaan. But he went with his nephew Lot, and then they grew rich indeed, and they had to separate because there was starting to be sort of disagreements between their herdsmen. So he said, well, you find your place and I'll find my place and all this business. So they went, and so Lot looked down and saw the plains of Sodom and Gomorrah. Gee, it looks green, it looks nice, shiny object. And he was like, I'll take that side. Can you imagine? The senior one actually gave him the opportunity to choose first. Most other cultures will be uncle or grandma or whoever that would go first, but no, Abram said, you choose first. I'll just hang around. So he did. He chose the land of Sodom, and we know Sodom and Gomorrah, and we know what happened eventually. So at that time, we talk about the Sumerians. A lot of people, when they talk about the Sumerians, they think about Anunnakis, arriving from God knows where, Enki and Enlil arriving at Uruk or Eridu, and the Sumerian kings list and all these kind of things. But, this is extra biblical. So I'm just going to stick with the Bible. And people tend to say, oh, well, where did Sumeria disappear to? Well, it's been hiding right under our noses in the Bible, ladies and gentlemen. Because in the book of Genesis 14, titled Abram Rescues Lot, at the time when Amraphel was king of Shinar, that is Sumeria, ladies and gentlemen, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. These kings went to war against Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemba, king of Zeboim, okay, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. Remember the rock Zoar? That's where Lot, ran to with his daughters. All these latter kings joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is in the Dead Sea. If you've been to Israel, the Dead Sea, nothing grows there. It's just salt and nothing grows, okay? They've made it all nice and pretty, but nothing grows there. Now, for 12 years, they had been subject to Kedorlaomer, so the king of Elam, okay, and the other chiefdoms. But in the 13th year, they rebelled, and in the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the kings allied with him went out and defeated the Rephaites, the Ashtoreths, the Karnaim, the Zuzites in Ham, the Emites, and Shaveh Kiriathaim, and the Horites in the hill country of Seir, okay, as far as El Paran, near the desert. So you can read the whole story. Then they turned back and went to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and they conquered the whole territory of the Amalekites, as well as the Amorites, two bodies, as you shall soon see in the Bible, that's the way God described them, who were living in Hazezon Tamar. Then the king of Sodom, king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, marched out and drew battle lines at Siddim. Okay, that is the Dead Sea Valley. Against Kedolaoma, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goim, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, Sumeria, and Arioch, king of Alasar. 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of tar pits, so that tells you they were rich. They had tar, which made them mark that tar pits, because I've got another story I'll tell you, which the wealth of Sodom and Gomorrah contributed to them being, and not just their sexual wealth, the wealth led to all the sexual immorality, and it led them to being completely wiped out the face of the earth, as we know that story. So they seized everything. Anyway, I'll skip to verse 13. A man who had escaped came and reported this to Abraham the Hebrew. So meaning, for them to say Abraham the Hebrew, meaning he was living in a strange land. It's like, how will I say, it's like someone from Tennessee going to San Francisco, or that guy from Tennessee, or let's just say someone from Tasmania coming to live in the Northern Territory, oh, that Tassie guy. Or let's just say someone from how will I say, Lagos, coming to live in Zonkwa. You say, that Yoruba person or that Lagos person. So that's the way it is. So they reported this to Abraham the Hebrew, meaning he's kind of not part of them, who was living near the great trees of Mamre, the Amorites, a brother of Eshcol and Aner, all of whom were allied with Abram. So I think their alliedness kind of ended there, okay? Because down the track, if you read the whole thing, obviously in verse 18, Melchizedek appears because Abram defeated them and seized everything that they've taken, including Lot, his nephew, and his wife and children and everything. He brought them back. And so after he returned from defeating Kedolaomer, the king of Elam, and the kings allied with him, okay, so the king of Shinar and so on, the king of Sodom, whom Abram actually went to rescue, because don't forget his nephew Lot was living in Sodom and Gomorrah, so came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh. That's the king's valley. Then Melchizedek, out of nowhere, everybody knows this story, I'm not going to flog it to death, king of Salem. Some people say this is a Christophany, a prototype of Jesus, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hands." You see it? So he blessed Abram first, and then Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. I would like you to pause here, because half of your pastors, your papas say, give God this and then he will bless you. Like a vending machine, put $20 and then you'll get like 100, whatever, 20 naira, and you'll get 1,000 naira. Do this, do, and then God will bless you. No, actually, Melchizedek blessed Abram first. He produced bread, then wine, blessed Abram, praised him, and then blessed and said, "Praise be to God Most High, who delivers you from all these things." He didn't wait for Abraham to bribe him. "Oh, I have problems in the office. Somebody's looking at me with a green eye and a corner eye and some funny business over there." None of that nonsense. He blessed him first, and Abraham gave him 1/10. So we continue that story, but this particular story is about the cup of the Amorites. Don't forget, some Amorites here fought with Abram against King Kedorlaomer and the king of Shinar and the other 4 kings. Okay, so it goes on. The king of Sodom now with raised hand came to Abraham and said, give me the people and keep the goods, because naturally in those days when you go to war, you catch POWs, okay, bring them to your place and you make them slaves, and sometimes you actually take their territory and take all their stuff. It's like, give me the people but keep the stuff. Abraham said, hey, no, hell no. With raised hand I have sworn an oath to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread, or the strap of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abraham rich. You see that? I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten, and the share that belongs to the men who went with me. So to Ane, Eshcol, and Mamre. These are the Amorites, okay? Let them have, remember the great oak tree of Mamre? Ephron the Hittite near Machpelah. That's where Abraham bought a piece of land for his family's, eventual like burial plot. Okay, but that's further on. So it says, let them have their share, but I'm not, giving you any of this. And after this, the word of the Lord came to Abraham, do not be afraid, because at that point, Abraham then actually laid his petition. Ladies and gentlemen, he laid his petition. After God blessed him, he now gave bread, he gave wine, and then Abraham gave a tenth. It was like a cultural thing then, okay? There was nothing saying give this or give the other one. So the Lord made that covenant with him and says, don't worry, your son will not be begotten by Eliezer of Damascus. Damascus is Aram, okay? He said, you will have your own son, flesh and blood. Now, this is not about the story of Jacob, of Isaac and Ishmael, obviously. But we know what happened. Man, God gives time. Everything in God's good time is for the good of us. But we know what Sarai did. She took matters into her own hands and said, here, take Hagar, my Egyptian concubine, sleep with her so I can have a son. And not naturally, we know, Ishmael was born, but he was not the son of covenant. So again, I don't want to get, distracted, because I want you to come with me before we close off and to continue another time. So the cup of the Amorites, 1. So Genesis 15:12. As the sun was setting, Abraham fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own. So i.e. there will be foreigners, there will be IMGs, there will be maybe illegal immigrants, there will be maybe legal or illegal immigrants, that they will be enslaved and maltreated. Now I want you to just pause. Whichever country you're in, have you ever been treated badly or harshly because you're a foreigner in a country, that whether you went there, legally or not? And the other side of the equation is, when things are not going well in a country, most people tend to immediately lash out at the foreigners. Now, if you're in your own country, I want you to think, have you ever, lashed out either publicly by way of a protest or even when you think nobody's watching, said derogatory things about people who are foreigners, who don't look like you, sound like you, whether they be they children, women, old, whatever. I want you to think about that. And I don't need to hear your answer. Just answer to God whether you've ever, maltreated, enslaved, said horrible things about people who don't look like you simply because they are there. But they could be there as part of God's divine plan, as part of God's destiny. You never know. But anyway, so you can see that the slavery in Egypt was already forecasted even before Abram had a son. This was in the land of Canaan. Okay? He said they'll be enslaved and mistreated there, but I will punish the nation they serve as slaves. We all know what happened to Egypt eventually when after the 10 plagues and the Passover, when they left, how they drowned in the Red Sea. But follow me with this, because even the manner in which they left and the things that they got when they left was already predicted like 400 years ago. Who can do that except for God Almighty, whom we serve? But I'll punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. Now I want you to pause and think about that. A slave. So you can imagine someone who is either picking fruit, who is, taking jobs that the citizens wouldn't take, has nothing, like flogged, caned, made to do very inhumane, derogatory things, but they'll come out with great possessions. Where will they get these great possessions? You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good age. So you won't see this, but I'm telling you what will happen to your descendants. 400 years they will be in slavery. And it so happened that the Israelites were 400 years in slavery in the land of Egypt. He says, in the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here. So they will come back there to the land of Canaan. Because in between those 400 years, what happened? There was famine. We know the story. Jacob, Joseph's brother, sold him and he ended up in Egypt. And the father sent them to buy grain back and forth. And we know that story about Jacob and his brothers. And eventually the whole family moved to Egypt. And they stayed in Egypt, and Joseph was second only to the Pharaoh. So they had the best of the best to rear their cattle in Bashan. Okay? And he said, in that 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. The cup of the Amorites is not full. Drip, 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 drip of their sin when it is full. And God already saw that it will be full 400 years. What a great God we serve. 400 years. So once the sin of the Amorites and their wickedness reaches its full measure, then God will act. So sometimes when you're waiting, God has a plan running in the undercurrents that you're not seeing. Just what we talked in the last tip, we talked about the story of Esther and Purim and so on. And I said that the undercurrents story in that particular story to me was God trying to finish off what he has said, because he said that not a word that comes out of his mouth will fall down and not bear fruit. And he has already decreed that the Amalekites be completely destroyed, but somehow his people failed to do that. So he had to do it through unusual means. And for me, I believe that's what Esther was put there, to achieve that complete destruction of the Amalekites. So, when the sun has set and darkness has fallen, a fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants, I will give this land, this same land that you're in. Don't forget, your people will leave this land eventually because of famine. They will be elsewhere for 400 years, but they will come back. Okay? It says, I'll give this land from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, so with an E, the Kenizzites, the Kadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaites, the Amorites. You see that? So the Amorites, because the sin, he's waiting for the sin of the Amorites to be complete. And the Canaanites. Okay? Also, the Girgashites and the Jebusites. Jebusites, that's Jebus, that's current day Jerusalem, okay? So look, I'd like to leave it here, and we will continue in our next deep dive on the undercurrents, because like I said, woven throughout Bible are two opposite narratives going on, okay? From the war in heaven, Lucifer and Archangel Michael and his angels, and Lucifer and his angels, to the woman sitting across the sea with the sun on her head as a crown and 12 stars and her feet on the moon. And then you just move a few chapters later, and there is Babylon, the prostitutes, fallen. Okay? There's Babylon, fallen, and she had her feet across many seas. And instead of 12, the number of God, she had 10 horns and God knows what, coming on. So there's always an undercurrent. So we shall continue right there to talk about the cup of the Amorites being full. Thank you for joining me, and I'd like you to smash the subscribe button. I welcome your comments, your criticisms, and see you next time. Thank you for watching.